All right, everybody sees a little red dot at the right-hand side. That means we are on the record and we are recording. We're back after a short break, and we are going to begin the cross-examination of Mr. Buford by Mr. Baldwin. So go ahead, Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Buford, good morning to you. I have a few questions as it relates to just your recollection memory of events. Is that okay?
Yes.
You recall your attorney, Mr. Sultan, asking you several questions regarding your recollection of particular dates. Is that correct?
Yes.
One of the exhibits that Mr. Sultan provided to you was C3. I would ask that
Do you want that document up?
if you could pull that up for us, please. Do you recall that document, Mr. Buford?
1 second. All right. All right, do you see the document,
Yes.
Mr. Buford? Okay, Plains Exhibit 3, I'm going to the actual document page, ERD 032. This document has not been put into the record, so it's Complainant's Exhibit 3, not admitted to the record, but used for recollection. All right, go ahead then, Mr. Baldwin.
Plaintiff's Exhibit C3, Mr. Buford, do you recognize that document?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
Is that document an internal associates building maintenance document?
I'm going to object on the basis that.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yes, I'm going to object on the basis that the document hasn't been admitted. I used it merely to refresh Mr. Buford's recollection as to dates. There's been vehement objections throughout this proceeding, the actual content of memos and other documents. So I guess I'm going to object on law of this case.
All right, so Mr. Sultan, I'll let you know that you are only heard as a distant echo the way you just did your objection. I understand your response to the objection. So you're going to need to find a better way to do this so that we can actually hear you clearly on the record. I heard you. I'm not sure what the recording heard. It might even be better than what I heard. I just want you to be clear that wasn't great. Okay? All right, so I understand that the question is that this has not been marked and put into the record. And so I think the question is why are you asking about the document now? They're not putting it in as far as I know. Mr. Sultan, are you planning to put this document, Complaints Exhibit 3, into the record?
No, I used it merely to refresh the witness's recollection, and my concern is, frankly, 90403 wasting time.
Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate that, worked out better. Okay, so Mr. Baldwin, the reason why we're going into this?
I thought I just started the foundation of my questioning is as it relates to Mr. Buford's recollection. There were documents that were introduced to refresh Mr. Buford's recollection, and that was Exhibit C3 and I believe C4, and I am going to be asking questions related to Mr. Buford's recollection. I think it's relevant as it relates to timing, as it relates to these proceedings, as it relates to Mr. Buford's explanations as to when he knew something or when certain things occurred. So that's the nature of this questioning.
I think we're wasting time, but I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Buford, my question was, is this an internal ABM document?
No.
Did you, Mr. Buford, provide this particular document to your attorney?
Yes.
You recall giving a deposition back in 2020 of July 6th, don't you?
On July 6th.
July 6th, 2020, you gave a deposition related to the underlying facts of this case, the harassment of Ms. I'm sorry?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. This appears to be contradiction for contradiction's sake. So Taylor versus United States Railroad, under that Seventh Circuit decision from 2006, contradiction for contradiction's sake, and this is wasting time.
I'm not sure what point you're trying to make there, but I can't find out until I let Mr. Baldwin waste our time if necessary. Hopefully he's not wasting our time because it's his client's time too. So go ahead.
Thank you. You recall giving a deposition regarding the underlying facts of this case, correct?
Yes.
And in that deposition, you indicated that you, in fact, did not create this document, correct?
I guess I'm going to object on the basis that it appears Mr. Baldwin is trying to impeach Mr. Buford's testimony, but we don't have the deposition transcript. And so he's asking the witness to rely on his
Recollection.
summation of testimony.
His recollection. That's what I'm asking him.
Mr. Baldwin's summation of the testimony, which we
Okay.
don't have. So he's going to have to show it to the witness if he wants to try and impeach him.
Mr. Baldwin, do we have the deposition?
I have the deposition, but the witness has not answered the question, so I don't need to impeach until he answers falsely.
Do you know the answer to that question, Mr. Buford?
What was the question again?
On July 6, 2020, you gave a deposition regarding the underlying facts of this case. Is that correct?
I believe so. I mean, all this stuff was long ago. I mean, like he showed me documentations to refresh my memory. If I can't see it in front of me, I don't know what you're talking about.
So you're sitting here today, you have some difficulty remembering the sequence of events that happened in the underlying case. Is that correct?
I guess I'm going to object to the reference of the underlying case. He means Miss Moore's lawsuit.
That is correct. Miss Moore's lawsuit.
The same lawsuit that he had objected to the admission of the underlying facts.
Now, Mr. Sultan, I think you're wasting our time. I think if the witness has a problem answering the question, he can ask for clarification.
Mr. Sultan is his attorney and he has a right to object. So do not think that I'm accepting that as a basis, Mr. Baldwin. That's not appropriate and you know it. So go ahead, ask your question.
Mr. Buford, are you testifying today that you have a difficult time remembering the sequence of events related to the underlying case? And by the underlying case, I mean the case involving Ms. Natasha Moore.
Yes, I do. Yes.
Yes, you do definitely what? Have a difficult time remembering the sequence of events?
Some sequences, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now you had you were the supervising maintenance person for ABM, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. Um, and you are aware of an individual by the name of Mr. Abdullah,
yes,
and he was an individual that helped you fulfill the contract.
I'm, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Did
Before you
Mr.
go there, can we have a spelling of Mr. Abdullah?
Yes, Abdalla.
And first name, please.
First name is Akalana, but I gotta find the spelling for it for you.
Spell it, please.
Yes.
Akinla.
I can't hear you, Mr. Sultan. You're way too far away.
Sorry, it's Akinla.
Akinlana. Yes, I
Yes.
hear you nodding. Okay, and Mr. Abdullah's position with the respondent, Mr. Buford, was what?
Was the director, he was the director of facilities for Next Door Foundation.
And one of your duties was to coordinate working with Mr. Akalana Abdullah, is that correct?
Yes,
Um, and was he in any way involved with um, authorizing the fulfillment of the contract when you communicated with him?
can you repeat the question again?
Sure. So was he your point person, your coordinating person to help you facilitate the terms and conditions of the contract?
Yes,
Did that also involve employment decisions?
um, I'm not sure.
Um, you're
I
not
don't, I
sure
don't
whether,
know, I don't know what was in ABM's contract with Next Door.
so you were not acquainted with the terms and conditions associated with ABM's contract?
I don't know what was in a contract, no.
Were there ever issues raised, or are there ever issues raised as to how many individuals could or should be employed by ABM in order to fulfill the contract?
I'm not sure.
Were there ever issues of cost associated with the fulfillment of the contract discussed with you?
Not to my knowledge.
You don't ever recall having any discussions as it related to whether or not the overhead for fulfilling the contract with Nextdoor Foundation was exorbitant or not?
No,
Were you at any time requested to hire or fire any individual by ABM?
yes,
How often did that occur?
not too often.
Do you ever recall whether or not Nextdoor Foundation, through Mr. Abdullah, requested you to hire or fire any employees?
Yes. Well,
Yes to him.
well, no. You mean ABM employees?
Yes, like Juan or anybody, any employees that were associated with ABM, that Mr. Abdullah request of you or Mr. Smith to fire any employees.
I think that might be, a question with upper management. So he
My
might have
question
requested,
is, my
he might
question
have
is to
requested
you.
it from Corey. He didn't request it from me.
You don't recall ever having a conversation with Mr. Abdullah on the phone
Yes,
about, yeah,
yes,
let me finish
yes,
my question so I make sure it's clear. Did you ever have a conversation with Mr. Abdullah on the phone about firing or hiring any particular employee?
yes.
In those instances where Nextdoor Foundation attempted to impact the employment decision of ABM's employees, did you have a conversation with Mr. Smith regarding that?
Yes.
Did you and Mr. Smith ever attempt to save or protect an ABM employee regardless of what Nextdoor Foundation wanted to do?
Yes. I believe so. I don't. Are you talking about the time when Juan kept opening the school up late? Yeah, yeah, that's true.
What's true?
I said, are you referring to the incidents when Juan kept opening up the school late?
You mentioned an individual by the name of Juan. What is Juan's last name?
I think it's Gonzalez.
Okay. And Mr. Gonzalez was an employee of ABM.
Yes.
And to your recollection, did you know whether or not Mr. Gonzalez met the employment requirements of Nextdoor Foundation?
To my knowledge, he did.
And to your knowledge, was Mr. Gonzalez an employee of ABM that you and Mr. Smith attempted to protect?
Just gonna object at this point. I've given considerable leeway here, but I don't see how this is relevant to this proceeding at all.
Mr. Bowen?
If I might, Your Honor, the purpose of this proceeding, as I understand it, is the contractual business decision that Mr. Smith has taken regarding Mr. Buford. And Mr. Buford can establish that Mr. Smith, as well as Mr. Buford, made business decisions as it relates to the contract and the fulfillment of the contract. Our focus is on that contract. Our focus is on the terms of that contract. Our focus is on the overhead and the cost of that contract, because that is what we continue to assert, is that Mr. Smith made a business decision as it relates to Mr. Buford's employment.
Okay, go ahead.
Your Honor, if I might just add something to my objection.
Oh, speak up, please.
Thank you. The business judgment rule is an affirmative defense that has to be pleaded in a business contract case. This is not a business contract case, and it hasn't been pleaded anyway. There hasn't been any reason given by the respondent for Mr. Buford's termination at all in this case. And the idea that Mr. Buford, who's already testified that he didn't have anything to do with the negotiations of the contract, that he'd be able to elicit that testimony from him, I think is just not the case. And he has Mr. Smith is on the call and could, I guess, testify to that if it was deemed relevant by Your Honor. But we're going on 20 minutes of questions about items that are not related to the termination decision.
Okay, 1 second. I'm looking at their answer again.
What did they answer?
Okay. The respondent has claimed a non-discriminatory reason. Um, Mr. Baldwin is claiming now it has something to do with some kind of business judgment. And so at this point, I am going to allow that. So. Go ahead. I mean, the thing is, Mr. Sultan, if you want to know, you should have asked more questions during investigation, during this matter to find out exactly what their position was. And so they're now being allowed to do it late in the case, which should not have happened. They should have given the answer during the investigation. They should have given a proper answer. And then you, Mr. Sultan, should have found out what their real answer and reason was during the discovery period. So we can all be surprised together at what the respondent now says is the reason for the termination of Mr. Buford. This is not Perry Mason, but unfortunately, apparently, we're doing Perry Mason. Go ahead.
Well, Your Honor, I would, in my office defense, indicate that there was further expounding on the answer by the summary judgment motion. And
which I did not read because we don't have summary judgment.
Well, that would not have precluded Mr. Sultan from reading it. So I don't think he's that much surprised.
Okay, let's move on.
All right. So, Mr. Buford, I believe my standing question was, as it relates to the Next Door Foundation, was there occasion where the Next Door Foundation attempted to impact your ABM's employment decisions? Mr. Gonzalez being
Yes.
specifically.
Yes.
Do you recall the types of services that were necessary to be fulfilled by ABM as it related to the contract?
You know, I wasn't given a copy of their contract. No,
Yes.
sir.
I'm only asking as it relates to your memory. Do you recall whether or not there were certain services that were required to be met under the contract?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you say something? I can't hear you.
Yes.
Do you recall whether or not one of those cost factors was paper, like in toilet paper?
Not sure.
You can't recall.
I don't know what was in this contract.
I
Keep telling
understand,
us.
but you dealt with the maintenance day to day, is that correct?
Yes.
There were calls that were made between you and Mr. Smith, correct?
Yes.
Issues regarding supplies or lack thereof, is that correct?
Yes.
And most of these discussions you guys had, was it through text messages or phone calls?
Phone calls.
Did you have a office at ABM?
No.
Did you have an email at ABM?
Yes.
And what was your company email address?
I don't remember.
When you communicated with Mr. Smith regarding uh, management issues, did you use the company email address?
No.
When you were hired for your position for ABM, uh, were you hired specifically for this particular location, the Capitol Street location,
Yes.
Capitol Drive location? I'm sorry? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Was there more than one location for the facilities for Nextdoor Foundation um, other than Capitol Drive?
Yes.
And at any point during your employment, did you handle or manage both facilities?
Yes.
The other facility, just for the record, was located where?
On 29th Street.
How soon after you were employed did you start managing both the 29th Street and the Capitol Drive location?
Maybe a year after.
During your management of both locations, a year after you've been employed by ABM, do you recall, only if you recall, whether or not you and Mr. Smith had ongoing conversations about the cost associated with Capitol versus the cost associated with 29th Street?
I don't recall.
Do you recall ever receiving a letter from your attorney about trying to keep track of, uh, retain any records that you might have, both physically and electronically?
Would object to any attorney-client communications.
Sustained.
Let me ask you more direct. Did you attempt to maintain, keep, retain any electronic data or physical records as it related to your management or services at ABM?
Because I'm going to object basis that this isn't relevant to this proceeding.
I'm sorry, please open up, say it again. Please say louder.
I'm objecting on the basis that it's not relevant to this proceeding, as the respondent did not propound any ESI requests or other discovery requests within the prescribed time period by the division's scheduling order, and so we're wasting time here.
Okay, Mr. Baldwin?
I haven't asked for any documentation. Again, my question is simply going towards Mr. Buford's recollection, and I want to be able to establish how much he knows or how much he could have known based on his recollection, his interactions with staff, or whatever documents he might have recorded or kept track of in the process. That's what this case is about. His recollection. Mr. Sultan keeps bringing up his recollection. I'd like to test his recollection.
Okay, go ahead. Ask the question again, please, Mr. Baldwin.
My question to you, Mr. Buford, is did you retain, maintain, or keep any records as associated as it relates to your management or association with ABM while you were employed?
Yes.
Did you retain, do you still have those records in your possession?
No.
Your Honor, that's all the questions I'm going to ask this witness.
All right, thank you. Any redirect, Mr. Sultan?
No,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
no, I do not have any redirect.
No redirect, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Buford. You're no longer needed as a witness, but of course you get to stay because you're a party to this matter. So, Mr. Sultan, what is your plan?
Yeah, I just have an interim question.
I need you to speak up. This is very difficult.
Yeah, I just have an interim question. Can I sequester Mr. Buford just in case
I can't hear you again.
Sorry, can I sequester Mr. Buford in case I need to recall him as a witness?
It's up to you. You can certainly do that. I'm just not requiring you to do so. But if you're going to do that, then Mr. Buford, you have to understand you're not going to hear the testimony. You shouldn't be talking about the testimony with other witnesses or listening to anybody else testify, correct? You understand that?
I do understand.
Okay, so that's fine.
I just don't want his testimony, if I do have to recall him, to be influenced by the other witnesses.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to be careful to not impede your relationship with your client or impede your representation of him because he's not there to give you assistance. Are you comfortable that you're able to proceed with this case without him present?
I am. I think it's more beneficial that if I have to recall him, that his testimony is not influenced by any of the other witnesses.
All right, then where will Mr. Buford be so that we have an idea of where it is he's going to be isolated from other witnesses?
I will have him in a separate conference room down the hall.
Okay.
Your
Ed,
Honor, I
did you
would
have
also,
something to say, Mr. Baldwin?
I do. Um, uh, I don't have any further questions of this witness. My colleague has said he has no more further questions of the witness. My understanding, the only reason that Mr. Buford would be recalled is as a rebuttal witness.
Correct.
And so I hope that Mr. Sutton understands that I would object if he were to try to recall Mr. Buford back for any other reason than rebuttal.
Mr. Sultan?
I understand the rules of evidence, Your Honor.
Okay, that's fine. All right, then thank you. And before Mr. Buford goes, who are you planning to call next?
Natasha Moore.
Okay, is she going to be a long witness? Should we take a lunch break?
She will
I
not be.
think she,
I let Mr. Sultan answer, and then I'll let you respond, please, Mr. Baldwin.
I have between 10 and 15 minutes of questions of Ms. Moore.
Okay, Mr. Baldwin?
Your Honor, Ms. Moore is the subject of the underlying case, sexual harassment case. We've stipulated to the detail, the fact that there was that matter, unless she has something to testify as it directly relates to Mr. Moore's termination, then I would object to the testimony.
Mr. Sultan?
She does. That's why she's here.
Okay, so you can always object when he asks a question and let us know. So I'm going to allow that, and then after Ms. Moore, we're going to take a lunch break. So, okay, so let's get Ms. Moore, Mr. Buford, thank you for your testimony, and you can go to this secure location and, you know, look at anything else, but not the information about this case, okay? You understand that? You didn't answer me.
She can hear you now. Go ahead.
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. We'll just wait here. All right, Ms. Moore, good morning. I take it you've been vaccinated as well?
Say vaccinated.
I can't hear you.
She say vaccinated.
No? So Mr. Sultan, you're having her in the same room with you?
I'm vaccinated, Your Honor. I'm comfortable. I understand.
I can't hear you. I mean, this is a disaster. Yes,
Sorry, I'm comfortable doing it this way, Your Honor. I really only have very few questions for Ms. Moore.
okay. And Ms. Moore, you're comfortable in the situation that you're currently in terms of any kind of COVID considerations? I need to hear you. You've got to speak into this
Yes.
phone, unfortunately.
Yes.
Is there a way for her to have this like closer to her?
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, you're still speaking very softly. I'm not going to get any testimony out of you this way.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so how is this going to work, Mr. Sultan? Were you asking her question if we only have the one phone between you?
I can speak up, Your Honor.
I can't hear a word you say now that you've got the mask on and the phone is way away from you.
Here, I will turn on the laptop.
I'm sorry, what?
I will turn on the laptop. Back to the laptop. I think if I just turn on my laptop, that should work.
Okay.
Is that better now?
Yes, I can hear that. And what about Miss Moore?
More, can you hear?
Miss Moore?
I need to unmute
Didn't
her.
hear anything, I don't think.
Maybe we should just go to lunch. It's 11.
Moore or Mr. Sultan?
Ms. Moore, can you say something so we can hear you?
Mr. Sultan, why don't we just go to lunch and you can get a chance to organize your technology?
That's fine.
Okay, that's good. All right, let's take till it's almost 12. We'll come back at 12:45. That should hopefully give enough time for Mr. Sultan to correct the problems and also to get lunch. So 12:45, we'll be back. All right, thank you. I'm stopping the recording.